Since the infamous Sandy Hook shooting, there have been more than 2,429 mass shootings, according to Vox.com. I've prayed I or anyone I know would never have to experience anything like this. However, in today's world, that may be a possibility. I've always felt very strongly on this issue. I was raised in a household where I was taught to defend myself and those around me. Many people in the United States have either been affected by a mass shooting or know someone who has been. Due to this being such a growing issue, I felt it's necessary to bring this topic to the public's attention. This topic connects to me on a very personal matter. I've grown up with the question of, will this ever happen to me, any of my loved ones? How would I or they handle this? How would I respond? Will I ever be a victim? With this topic, there are some concrete points that I believe need to be addressed. In general terms, gun-free zones are more deadly than areas where concealed carry holders are permitted. Gun-free zones do not allow the general population to defend themselves. And gun-free zones also provide a false sense of security to the people in these areas. I'll now discuss some of the topics of gun-free zones. When an area is labeled to be a gun-free zone, the idea behind it is to give the general population a sense of security, a sense that they're safe in that area. Most of the time, this isn't the case. These zones can give the people in them a false sense of security, leading them into thinking that no one will attack them because weapons aren't permitted on the premises. In the event of an attack, an unarmed population would be left as victims. In these circumstances, the only way to stop an attacker would be to have an armed population. According to the Crime Prevention Research Center, gun-free zones, which are areas where guns are prohibited, have been the target of more than 98% of all mass shootings. This staggering number is why such designated areas are often referred to as soft targets, meaning unprotected and vulnerable. Your Second Amendment right is meant to help you defend yourself and those around you. Gun-free zones infringe on your right to bear arms and to protect yourself and those around you. The world is not as safe as we were led to believe when we were kids. Not everyone that you meet wants to be your friend, or even be nice to you for that matter. In this world, there are many people that wish to inflict harm upon you. There are many cases across the United States where a good guy with a gun has stopped an attack. If these people were not carrying due to a gun-free zone, the outcome of the following examples would have been vastly different. An example of this took place in Tucson, Arizona, earlier this year, matter of fact. A middle-aged nurse stopped outside a Starbucks in Tucson, Arizona on her way home from work. After she returned to a car, a man with a knife reportedly entered on the passenger side and began hitting her repeatedly in the head, neck, and torso. The woman, who is ex-military, said she was able to retrieve her firearm from her purse with her other hand whilst defending herself. She pointed the firearm at the man or told him to stop or she would shoot. I read this the other day in The Armed Citizen on page 1011 in American Rifleman. Another example of this took place outside a bar. Bars are notorious for being gun-free zones, and a lot of violent acts take place at bars. In this example, 3 women were leaving a bar just after midnight on January 24th in Cape Coral, Florida, and allegedly were pursued by a man who bought them drinks and began acting erratically. The woman left the bar and flagged down a passing truck and begged the man to let them in. After letting the women in, the driver displayed his firearm and told the suspect to back off. The suspect then entered his own vehicle and began ramming the truck until the vehicle's bumpers lodged together. The driver then fired shots towards the assailant. The suspect and the armed citizen both exited their vehicles and waited for police to arrive, while the armed citizen kept the suspect at gunpoint. Again, American Rifleman, The Armed Citizen, pages 10 and 11. Both of the gun-free zones in these examples were ineffective in protecting the population in these real-world examples. A gun-free zone does nothing to deter a would-be attacker. If someone is truly determined to inflict harm upon others, they will ignore the laws, signs, and policies in effect. A sign that reads gun-free zone, firearms and weapons are not permitted on the premises, would not prevent the attacker from inflicting harm to others. An example of this would be Sandy Hook. In this example, all schools in the United States are gun-free zones, and that did not stop the attacks. The places where the most mass shootings are in areas where the laws prohibit the population to carry their own firearms and to protect themselves. An example, this would be California, Illinois, most states on the eastern and western seaboards where these gun-free zones and their policies are written into law. Without adequately prepared and proactive citizens defending themselves, attacks would be a lot more common. Again, having been raised in a household where I was taught to defend myself no matter what the cost, I can see why someone suggests a gun-free zone could be an effective policy. This is not the case, in my opinion. Countless people in the United States that were in gun-free zones have been affected by mass shootings. This will always be a topic of discussion, and one day I hope a solution can be found. With this speech, I discussed these 3 main points. In general terms, gun-free zones are more deadly than the areas where concealed carry holders are permitted. Gun-free zones do not allow the general population to defend themselves, and gun-free zones provide a false sense of security to the people in these areas. While gun-free zones are still a hot topic of debate, I do believe that there is a solution out there. I do feel that everyone should be aware of the things going on in our country and have an opinion on them. In conclusion, I hope everyone is trying to find the means to a solution on this matter.